It's time. This has been coming for a long while. Consider this my redemption. I would not be where I am right now were it not for the first video on Earthrise, and I can never hate that video because of it. But that video was absolutely still me at my least thought out, worst argued, and most whiny. It was as much a video about Earthrise as it was me shouting back at all the reviewers calling every figure perfect. Really, it just kind of boiled down to the fact that I'd seen the 1,000,001th review where someone didn't give even one actual criticism of an Earthrise figure that I was really disappointed in because it looked like G1. And I got pissed. I was so sick of everyone pretending that Earthrise was completely perfect without a single flaw because it looked like G1. I'm gonna be honest, I sat down and wrote a script that moment titled Rant. The first of 2 scripts I ever wrote with that title. Ironically enough, I think the other one was also Earthrise related, being about the terrible Netflix show. If I'm not mistaken. I pointed it out at some point. So I did not think it through. I did not do a good job arguing my points. I was angry and I let it drag down the video. I made bad mistakes. Like, I gave off the impression that a big factor of why I didn't like Earthrise is because it didn't look like Siege. That's not how I meant it. I was just saying that the first time Earthrise disappointed me was to hear that we weren't going to be getting more Cybertronian figures. But that was only a mild disappointment. I was actually still really looking forward to the line. It was promising figures I needed for my collection. Most of the line was figures of characters I never had. But the way I phrased it made it sound like what I was saying was, fuck this, it's not Siege. I suppose that's what I get when I write a script in a hurry out of anger without any proofreading or redrafts. But yes, I was actually anticipating for Earthrise to be good, but every figure I got disappointed me. Most of them weren't terrible, but if you watched every single review out there, you could swear that every last figure was a flawless gift from God. And I snapped and I made a very flawed video. So consider this me taking a bit of a do-over. What's funny is I seem to have been on the forefront. Like, a lot of the sentiment around Earthrise has really soured. I guess everyone finally started seeing what I always could, because even the people that called it the best line in Transformers history have started to refer to it as a seriously flawed line with terrible QC and equally bad distribution. And that's hilarious. While everyone else's opinion of Earthrise hardened, mine kind of softened. Don't get me wrong, I'm not about to tell you that I was completely misguided, but I do come away from a completed Earthrise with a much less bitter taste in my mouth. Let's get into it, shall we? Starting off with the Battle Masters. The only one I didn't get was Double Crosser. What can I say? Sound Barrier wasn't good enough for me to get a worse version of him with 2 goofy heads. Smashdown's okay, his tail likes to come off and his hammer mode is really stubby, but you can pair that with Siege Soundwave's fold-out gun and get a way better Warhammer. Slitherfang is a cool little robo-snake. Fun fact, I couldn't find this little guy anywhere until late into Wave 3 where, because I couldn't find anything new, I drove well over 50 miles away from my house to a super target that had literally nothing but Slitherfangs. Distribution, one of Earthrise's Achilles heels. I got a pink rung, but that was from Siege. On to the Micromasters. I actually got 3 of these sets. The first one I got was Small Tank and Poo Car. Small Tank is pretty fun, Poo Car is crap. I found front of truck and back of truck with cannon before I ever found space tip and shuttle shaft. Front of truck and back of truck with cannon are great. Space tip and shuttle shaft suck shaft. Now, let's get a little loose with the format. Wheeljack. Before this figure ever came out, I thought it looked weird. After it came out, I thought it looked even weirder. It took the upgrade kit from Monology O Robotoch to get me to actually like this one, and now I do. I don't love it, but I do like it. Hoist. Honestly, this is one of my favorites from the line. He's probably what people are actually referring to when they talk about micro masterpieces. He looks just like the show model, he's got the correct proportions, alt mode is on point, and there's not really any kibble that shouldn't be there. It's a real bummer that he can't move his arm without his wings coming along for the ride, but this works where most others fail. Ironworks. A decent enough weaponizer with some good armored modes who, I only realized a little while back, they probably wanted everyone to buy over and over so they could build full cities with them. I was always confused as to why they had the whole road building thing when they didn't release enough unique characters to really take advantage of it. Grapple. A lot of people were under the impression that I think this is a bad figure. No, I said that I think that this figure is basically perfect. Unfortunately, it is boring in its perfection. It looks exactly as it should, and the way it should look is boring. It basically has a perfect transformation for what it should turn into. And it's a really boring, simple transformation. And the alt mode is boring. The colors are boring. And that's basically all perfect for what it's supposed to be. But it's boring. What's funny is while people were like, what's wrong with you? How can you hate this figure when the video first came out? A lot of people really have come to hate this figure after more and more stories came out about it breaking. Personally, I instantaneously recognized the pegs at the bottoms of his feet being severely at risk of breaking, so the first thing I did when I got the figure was clip out large chunks of them to prevent vacuums from forming and making them easier to take out of their holes. I would have clipped the tabs in half, but I was worried about that deforming the peg and making them into ovals that would no longer fit where they should. What I did seems to have worked, though I still worry and consider cutting them in half. Optimus Prime. One of the big contentious ones. I can say that this is a good figure, and I can say that I still really don't like this thing. Ignoring the terrible QC on the paint job, the legs are still way too fucking long, and the arms are too stuffy. Also, the rest of his proportions are bad too. Look at this, a fan Frankenstein together a Siege Prime's waist with the Earthrise's torso, and it looks so much better. The limb proportions go from terrible to good. The limbs could have so easily been fixed, though the rest of the proportions would still be bad if you only fixed the legs. A lot of people argue with me that the Siege Prime had a bunch of kibble while this has way less. And yes, that's true, but it's still way better because he didn't have rubber tire butt cheeks. And yes, I know that you can remove this part, you can actually see me accidentally doing that in the transformation on the original video, but the ass bracket still looks terrible, and now it's a parts former, which if you know me, you know I hate. This figure poses well, it looks good if you can get past the proportions, and the transformation is clever and interesting, even if I hate the faux forming grille. So, this is a good figure, but I personally don't like it, and I don't think it's as good as people say it is. It's also got serious QC issues, and it's got no business being a leader. Them charging leader price for this is a ripoff. That trailer he came with isn't worth $2 extra, let alone 20. This is a Voyager, nothing more. Then, let's talk about the Starscream. I never had a classic Starscream, but I heard people saying that this was a retool of that, so I said it in my original video, and I had a guy come in and tell me that he couldn't believe a YouTuber would spread false information like this because this was nothing like that one. I think he was under the impression that I was bigger than I was at the time. So I was like, wow, okay, maybe I heard wrong or misinterpreted or something. So I looked into it, and sure enough, no, he was just 100% utterly wrong. This is absolutely just an upgraded retool of the classic Starscream. They are, for all intents and purposes, identical. And this figure sucks. It looks bloated, its transformation isn't fun, QC's bad, and it's even got massively wrong feet. And it's at this point that I have to start asking the question, why does everyone think this line is so accurate to G1? This guy only looks like Starscream if he was stung by bees. The Optimus Prime is sincerely off, and the Wheeljack is just kind of insane. The robot mode on him has the completely wrong torso, and the car mode is not even close. Whatever, moving on. Smokescreen. I kind of regret being as positive as I was in my review of this figure. While yes, I hammered this for having bad QC, basically the moment I posted the video, I was inundated with people sharing stories about this figure snapping in half. I didn't really consider how the figure being made out of largely brittle clear plastic and how bad the QC was would interact with each other. So I'm going to say that while the mold is fine, the materials it was made with aren't, and I would not be comfortable recommending this at all anymore. And now that I write this, I realize that I wish I'd put out a retraction earlier. Airwave. Pretty good, he's got some fun modes and a weird half head, but I got no issues here. The Alicon. I don't really care for this thing. I mean, this thing is borderline a faux-forming one-step changer with a really bad case of kibble in both modes. And pretty much the only reason that I don't tell everyone not to bother with it is because there is no other option. The two companies that made Alicons are gone and you can't get their products anymore. This isn't the worst, but it's not great. Snapdragon. This guy's okay. The robot arms are terrible. They brutally limit the posing this figure is capable of, and what little you can still pull off doesn't look good. His ship mode is quite solid though. Dino mode, not so much. Attaching the jaw is frustrating and terrible, it just doesn't want to cooperate, and it looks really, really bad when you succeed. Like Apeface, this is one of the lesser Titans Returns figures that was just delayed over and over. Astro Train. As far as I'm concerned, this is a Siege figure, but people really want to hear my take on him, and I've never really covered him, not adequately at least. Robot mode is dead on. Pose is about as good as any Siege figure. The wings don't hamper him all that much. His transformation to shuttle mode is pretty fun, and it looks perfect. Transformation to train mode is less fun, and it's significantly less perfect. To rationalize him being a leader, they gave him a ton of guns, which doesn't exactly make sense for the character, and the pathetic shoes do not count as any kind of upgrade to justify the leader price point. I am quite happy with this figure. I'd be happier at the Voyager price point, but I don't feel ripped off like with the Optimus, especially since this feels like 30% more dense than that Optimus. Double Dealer. Bigger than most modern leader figures, and much closer to the traditional idea of what leader class should be. He looks a bit bloated like an underwater corpse, probably because they want to fit in his wretched bird mode. This looks terrible, holds together like crap, and isn't worth my time. His missile truck mode, on the other hand, is quite good fun, and I actually really like this mode. It's a pretty decent leader. Wait. I hate this cliff jumper so much, you guys. I hate this thing. This is just the same figure as the Masterpiece 1.0 Bumblebee. It's on the exact same skeleton, but ruined. The real difference is you spin the waist around and fold the legs going the other way, and now there's parts forming. If they had just left it alone and let it be 0% different, it would have been disappointing, but it would have been a better figure, because the Masterpiece Bumblebee is good, and this is that, but fucked up. It's amazing how small the difference is and how much worse it is. This is also a slightly upgraded Legends figure being sold for deluxe price. It's also galling. You can buy an upgrade kit that makes him no longer a parts former, but that basically doubles the cost of this already too expensive figure, so it's not worth it in the first place. And the even more galling thing is when you find out that the figure was never supposed to be a parts former in the first place. Hasbro just wasn't willing to spend the money to make the part that would stop it from being one robust enough to not break. And Diego. I got the part, and it broke. Yeah, this chintzy piece of 3D printed crap broke after about 2.5 transformations. I can't tell if it was glued here and that failed, or if the plastic just delaminated, but yeah, that's like 20 bucks down the crapper. I'll say this, for the few minutes it deigned to exist, it made the transformation more fun and more satisfying. Oh, and installing it was a pain in the ass too. Thanks, Cliffjumper, you suck. And this is another one that people defend by saying it looks G1. No, it doesn't. More so than even most. The limbs are the wrong color, the crotch is wrong, his waist is gone, and his chest is beyond not even close. And I don't care about any of that, but why are people like, this is G1, so it must be defended, when it's so utterly not? On to RC. Fuck you. Wave 3, I basically could not find in stores. The only Wave 3 figure I ever saw at a brick and mortar shop was Fast Track, and I passed on that hard. I thought it looked bad in pictures, but in reality, the body looked three-dimensional while its head looked like it was off a cardboard standee of the figure, so it was even worse than I expected. Trailbreaker. This is a retool of the Hoist figure, and while that was probably a micro masterpiece, the same cannot be said of Trailbreaker. The head is dead on the money, but the body is so wrong. They did a fair amount to retool it, but it just can't go far enough. This is a good figure, just not good for the character, which is hilarious if you know the backstory on this guy. Run amok. Honestly, Wave 3 was where Earthrise really found its footing. Run amok was a good figure. Not amazing, but good. Solid robot mode, pretty sweet alt mode, solid transformation with some less good foe forming, but really, this was a good effort. And had this been where the whole line operated the whole time, I wouldn't have ever made my first contentious video on the subject. Sunstreaker. One of the best molds of the whole line. Possibly my favorite of the whole line, bar none. This took the Wheeljack mold that I never liked and turned it into something that looked good and was actually fun. It's maybe a little clunky and heavy set for Sunstreaker, but it's still great, and it doesn't have any of Wheeljack's really annoying foibles. The gun does suck though, and he can't hold it, but I'd say not being able to hold this isn't much of a loss. Didn't get Megatron, why would I? And screw that piece of crap Quintesson, I don't know anyone who's happy about those. Even Thew, the nicest reviewer, said they weren't any good. I also didn't buy any of the exclusives, which I mean, lucky me, a whole line with no exclusives that I wanted. No Scorponok either, screw that gaudy headmaster. Skylings. To be fair, this line kind of made my dreams come true by giving us a Commander-class Skylings, but I'd be lying if I said I love this thing as much as I want to. It's just got some issues. For starters, a lot of its joints are ludicrously weak, especially the mushroom pegs, to the point where every last one of them pops off with way less effort than they have any business doing. And the base mode really compromises this guy. I can't tell you the number of times I was just trying to pose Skylings and ended up flaying the sides of him wide open. Also, his mouth doesn't open up nearly wide enough. You want some full-on, unhinged horror show action, but this is all you get. And lastly, the connection between his two halves is hard to make and tenuous at best. It looks great, poses pretty much as good as you could want it to, and he is pretty good fun. I do love this thing, but every time I handle him, there's just this wistful longing for these issues to just not be present, because these are all really easily fixable, and they just stop it so tantalizingly close from being 100% satisfying. Ultimately, I come away from Earthrise much less angry than when I started my channel. Is it a good line? No. At best, it's very mixed. From the massive breakage issues people have, to the poor tolerances and poor paint, to the engineering being not as good as we got with Siege or Titan's Return, or would get later with Kingdom. For the most part, this line is acceptable, but it's not what people at least used to hype it to be. But I think people have kind of come to realize that now. It's no longer the best Transformers line ever, it's just another one. And you know what? That's pretty fair. And that's not half of what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know you know what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you'll enjoy listening to me waste your time.